This is Kit, and today we're going to be doing our tour of Araeng. I know we're starting in the Crystarium. That's simply because I wanted to take advantage of the Amaro trainer that you can use to fly to Araeng initially. Which you talked to our Ardvoy Amaro trainer here. It's not going to be any fancy things past the initial welcome cutscene for transition, but it'll have you land right here. We got this guy here, Cell. Got the little Amaro that I assume he rode in on. And it's a nice little landing platform and kind of like a staging area for traders, because the nation of Araeng is in itself a recovering trading nation. It is, it's very poor in terms of creating any types of crops because of the harsh desert landscape, which is similar to Uda in that sense. And it is half submerged, kind of like the fairy kingdom of Ilmegas with its previous buildings. But it still has a lot of the original architecture that remains prior to the flood, which makes it a really cool place to go and be able to try to figure out any of the original lore. So from the landing point, you just simply cross this bridge, and then you end up arriving past the Fields of Amber to the trading city of Morsuk, which is actually the home of, I don't remember what their actual race name is here. I think they're just Morg traders, as everyone calls them. But think of them as kobolds from the source. The only difference is that they don't wear the little metal helmets like the kobolds do, so you get to see their little beady eyes of death. And they're still really cool, they have the same quirks as kobolds and everything. Get rid of Midgard's armor, he's going to cover up half the screen for this tour. Better. And for obvious reasons, because this is one of the bigger trading settlements, it does have an aetheryte for this area. It's nice little, I want to say 3/4 circle town, where it has an archway that leads back into the Fields of Amber from here and the side that we came in on, which is on the opposite side of this giant freaking skeletal system. I know at some point someone says what it is, but I personally cannot remember what these bones are for the life of me. I just use them as a fun cave. Oh, it's the backbone of Samuel. Well, that's always good to know. I just got slapped by cheese. I'm not going to argue, cheese is good. I just wasn't expecting it. I'm going to take a brief moment in this tour to eat the cheese, because cheese is still good. Anyways, because of it being a desert landscape, you would have more of the pesties and cactuars being the reoccurring mob here. Then you do have these little areas, because it is kind of like a ruined area, kind of half submerged by the sand. But it's mostly just a giant open area. There are some lower cliffs. We do have our giant turtles that we must revere, because they will kick your ass if you're not careful. If you are able to fly like I can, you can get some pretty good sights from the top of these little, remaining watchtowers. You can get this one, you can get a good view of the backbone there. The original kingdom that you flew in from the Crystarium. And you can get a really good look of Morsuk from here. You can get some really good shots from the top of the tower there, but you're not able to get up there from foot. The only time you go up there is doing a cutscene in the MSQ with Alize. So, through the Fields of Amber, there is a faint pathway down. It's not beaten into the ground like you would see in Lakeland or Yulmore, because it's sand, it's going to blow over it. But it will end up leading you down here to the inn at Journey's Head, which does have an aetheryte, because it is a popular area, even though it's mostly just kind of like the last place people go to die, if they've been corrupted by sin eaters. They come here so that way they kind of get to choose how they go out. And just south of that, we have some ants, there's some mummies over off in that direction with some worms. this is the kind of like the docking station for when you start the Eden raids, because this is where they park the car where you can travel into the empty. And this beautiful giant wall of glass is the result of the Oracle of Light staying the flood to keep Norvrent from being completely consumed and engulfed like the rest of the world. I want to see if you can get a good look of it, of the empty from over here. Essentially, what the flood did was all that past the thing. We're not able to fly out there because of story reasons, but that is essentially what the rest of the world looks like, is nothing but a disheveled, flattened, white mass. And down here we have some more like lizard mobs, and then we also have these guys, which were, I want to say, introduced either in this expansion or in Stormblood, where they're essentially sentient weapons. If you couldn't tell from the guy being able to wield the axe over his head, most of the common ones, because this is an elite hunt, usually just have like short swords for their weapons. Ignore the lizard. And this is one of the important areas that we do come to later on. In terms of the actual layout for Araeng, it is set up like Halusia in the fact where you only really get to explore half of it now, like in the beginning, and then the other half of it later on when you get a different pathway shown to you. In the first half, the most that you'll be able to explore really is the Fields of Amber and just this entire little section here. Because as you can see, there's no connecting land masses here. It's just cut off from the rest of Araeng, which you can get through from taking the footpath from Lakeland. But just to save us time on the tour, I'm not going to have us travel back to Lakeland just to go over. So we are going to be starting down here in Araeng, which is essentially ground zero for where the Oracle of Light stayed the flood of light ether, which you could tell from the giant wave of crystallized ether that tried to crash down and completely ruin this beautiful architecture. And we do still have some good traveling areas here. We have a little bit of people trying to rebuild. It's not as much, just because of the conditions of this area in of itself. And then putting Sin Eaters into the mix just makes it a nightmare. And you can go down here. There really isn't a whole lot. It's mostly just like if you wanted to get up close and personal with the actual like light crystal itself. And you can actually see the land starting to terraform into like the corrupted light land that you saw on the other side of the wall. Like this is what it would look like up close and personal if you were walking around on it. Where it's no longer sand, it's more just like crystallized glass. And then we got our very funky pinecone palm trees, which I'm still personally confused about, but for those ones. And here we have a trolley system, which actually is also run by Talos. See, I told you they'd be making a comeback. And we have a good trail system going throughout the area. If you go off this way instead of continuing uphill for the trail system, you end up in Laddle. There isn't really a settlement here, if you couldn't tell from all of the armadillos just kind of chilling out trying to kill people with their spiky tails. But this is kind of like a meetup point for you and the rest of the party in the MSQ that takes you over to this lovely little place called Malik's Well, which is actually a dungeon. So this would be the area for that. You have all the like loose free running Talos is running around. You can get a better look of what like the desert Talos look like, because they don't have the pointed like metal chest pieces like Calusia does. Just because they're not really aiming more for fancy fixtures. They are built to get the job done, and they are going to do it. Alright. We can head back through Ladle. And then there really isn't anything over here in that section. It's mostly just a collapsed bridge. We go up this runway, which is usually closed off because this is supposed to be activated by a Talos having a magic pressure plate imbued into it. It's part of what makes it different also from the Calusia Talos, where those ones are more focused on functioning and moving the lifts and just carrying general heavy loads, whereas the Talos here actually ran the trolley cars. So we are now on the other side of that pathway. I'm trying to see if I can find the pressure plate. So here, what would happen is the trolley would run over the pressure plate. Nothing would hit because it'd be on the rails. But the Talos, since it's still stomping down the tracks, would land on the pressure plate, thus activating the gate, opening it up that way. So before we start following that, I'm going to side tour us over here to the left, where we have New Year's Leavings, which is essentially just a mine system. It's a bit bigger than the Dwarven mines in Calusia. And this was where they would mine out the enchanted hearts to create these Talos. Because the Talos themselves aren't just stone engineering. They have to be imbued with magic to get them to work. And the secret of that was literally having an enchanted crystal that was used as the heart to fuel the magic throughout the rest of the Talos. So they would have mine systems like this set up to mine out the hearts, and they would be able to create these Taloses, send them off where they needed to go, and everything was good for that. Then we still have the train system here. You can follow the train system if you want. I'm personally going to just so it's like a more cohesive pathway, but you can see the kind of like paths that have been stomped out from people traveling back and forth. Because at the time of the MSQ, the trails aren't, like the trolleys aren't inoperable because the Taloses themselves don't work. And without the things that push the carts around, they can't really use them. But you follow the trail and you follow the main roadway and you end up in the settlement of Twine, which also has an aetheryte. It is the only settlement in this half of Araeng that has one. Like, you have the 2 aetherytes for the inn and for Mortsuk, and then for this half, you just get Twine. Just because the only other major areas would be the trains, like the workstation for the trail cars itself, as well as a small moored trader settlement that you kind of stumble upon when you're coming here from Lakeland. So we follow the train track. I keep saying train when it's rails. Keep following the rails and we end up in the mine, like another mine structure. This was the big mine system where they would get the hearts from the Talos. Unfortunately, we're not able to go into it because of landmines that had happened during the story. But you can definitely tell how big of an operation it was here. Like, they definitely had built it up. And this was all, like, prior to the flood still. But they still were able to rebuild the materials and try to get back up at their feet until they couldn't get the hearts for the Talos. Then, if you take this little side road here, when you're first coming here, you're going uphill, so imagine the walk on that one. This one is a lot easier. But this little pathway will lead you down to the Morg trading settlement that I had mentioned previously, which is Garik. And this is essentially just an abandoned settlement from people where the traders just kind of took over and was like, hey, this is a good resting place to be able to get gossip, figure out what is and isn't going to sell, what the roads are like, things like that. And because this was supposed to be just like a passing through area, they didn't put an aetheryte here, which does make sense. Just because aside from talking to the traders, there really isn't much else to do here. You're not like as close to the mines as you would be to warrant it being like, okay, we can just teleport here and then walk 5 steps over. Because you can also just take the tracks to get there. Let me see. Yep, and that is the pathway to Lakeland right back there. If we continue going up this pathway, it would just lead us right back. Like I said, we have iguanas, a lot of like what you would expect in like desert life. Like cold-blooded animals, cactuars, things as such. And then this just leads you right back into the lower region of Lakeland, down here near Sullen. And then you have the little tunnel to show that you're heading into a different atmosphere altogether. But that would be the tour for Araeng. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Next up, I am going to be showing you guys the region for Ratika Greatwoods. And hopefully I will see you there. If not, hopefully you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you some other time.